This is Kirkby Hardwick in the heart of Nottinghamshire. What we see today is a group of stone cottages, a railway station on the Robin Hood line, a muddy stream, a conifer wood and a rounded hill that was once a coal tip, now landscaped and grassed over. But look more closely into the undergrowth and there are signs of something ancient. Long, high walls that were once much higher, with tall chimneys and Tudor windows and fireplaces. A rummage in the archives reveals just how ancient this place is, with references going back nearly 800 years to 1232.
In the year of our Lord 1382, in the reign of King Richard II, Reginald de Grey gives, grants and confirms to Sir John Babrishcourt, Knight, all his lands, tenements, rights and services in Hardwick in the parish of Kirkby.
When they wanted to define the boundary of the forest, they would walk along the boundary, and it's called a perambulation. It's mentioned in a perambulation from the time of Henry III at the start of the 13th century. Later on, we have one from the Tudor period, from the early 16th century, which mentions Kirkby Hardwick again, and at this point, the forest boundary swung round to the north and now includes Sutton Ashfield. And the point here is that people did not want to be in the forest. It was an unpopular place to be because the forest law prevented you from chopping down trees and all sorts of things, hunting deer, etc. We have a 17th century map that shows the boundary going round Kirkby Hardwick. So that means this place was important in the Tudor period, definitely, and into the 17th century when this map was drawn.
In the 1500s, Kirkby Hardwick was bought by George Talbot, 4th Earl of Shrewsbury. In 1530, he played host to a most famous man, Cardinal Wolsey, who, mortally sick and in disgrace, stayed the night on his journey back to London where he was to face trial under Henry VIII. A few days later, he died at Leicester Abbey. As the years passed, the great house changed. The ancient walls were allowed to decay, and new buildings sprang up inside. Finally, the industrial age took over, and the railway sidings and great spoil heap from Summit Colliery gradually crept up on the south side. Then came the wrecking ball, and in 1966 the house was demolished and nature took over. For 40 years it disappeared from sight, but one person who had lived there in the 1930s as a young married woman didn't forget. Betty Kirk wrote about her life in the house and the ghosts that haunted it.
Building there.
She talked to Dennis Hill, the local heritage officer, and to Ursula Spence, the senior county archaeologist, and persuaded them there was much to discover on the site. They linked up with the local archaeology group, and a successful bid was made for funding. The plan is for an exploratory dig to try and answer some of the mysteries of the site. How much of it survived the demolition? How did the house develop? And are there traces of the medieval manor left beneath the ground? Today the site is being prepared for the dig. Digging begins on the 3rd of October 2011. Volunteers arrive and David Budge uses a model to explain where the trenches are placed and why.
What there appears to be is a sort of outer wall which has Tudor features in it. It's got Tudor fireplaces, doors and windows. So perhaps we've got a Tudor house here-ish, and then later on you've got a later structure built in the middle of it. A variety of wings. We're going to be excavating in several places, looking at this west wing here and the courtyard, see if there's any features associated with the Tudor building. Got a trench in here somewhere looking hopefully at this corner of the main block, and then we've got an area over a building over here, and then this wall down here, garden wall, drawn in very same way by the Ordnance Survey as this Tudor wall, and you've got a strange protuberance sticking out of this garden wall further down, and we want to know if that's a Tudor chimney as well, similar to those, in which case it'd be a huge Tudor house, or if it's just some kind of garden feature or something like that.
Now the hard work begins.
Not to find anything, I can't
Yes. What we're going to do first is split you into two groups, if we could. Now, who's dug before? I think you'll be that one.
Okay.
And I think Andy will probably be that one. And then no tiles there. And then some of this stone, which could be the wall. So, yeah, yes.
carry on, Dave, I'm listening.
So we don't want to put spoil on.
Early progress is most evident in Trench 2, where the quarry tile flooring of the former smithy is being revealed.
We've now reached the end of the first day. How's it gone?
It's gone brilliantly. As you can see, we've made great progress since this morning. This morning, all this was covered in just muck, and we've cleared that back. We've also extended the length of it, so we're starting to see the size of this building. Just behind the camera, there's one wall, and then just over there is another wall, and it's a massive, massive, great stone wall, and it's filled in between with these beautiful tiles.
An early find hints at the age of the site.
I found something here, David! I think I found a piece of pipe.
Ah, so you have. It's a nice small one. Well, that'd be quite early, being so small. And I think that would be the first half of the 17th century.
Oh, fantastic.
So,
what, around James the First?
Yep.
We've got boards over here.
The standing walls need some expert study.
You can see in the distance by the chimney, just under the chimney, the depth of this wall, which is approaching a metre thick, which is very classically associated with older medieval structures. This stone could be anything really, from the medieval period right through to the 19th century, but I would guess by the look of the weathering, although that's never a very easy way to date anything, but certainly the stone to which it's placed and the filling in of this would seem to suggest that that you've got several 100-year-old remnant plaster there.
Important evidence for the medieval building comes to light. The bung hole of a beer container.
Oh, I wonder what that is.
I'll leave it for David. And speaking of finds, someone has to clean them up. You can't just put them in the dishwasher.
I washed all the finds. You have to take the water to the find, not put the find in the water because that could damage it. Laid it out on kitchen towel to dry. Today now it's dry, I am coding exactly whereabouts on the dig the artefact came from. This is Kirkby Hardwick, the year is 2011 and this is from trench 2, so it starts with the number 2 and the actual spot is coded as 220. All the finds will go to the office which is at County Hall and be stored there ready for anyone else to look at in the future.
As a community dig, there's a strong emphasis on sharing the story with local people, such as students from Kirkby College, a group from Willowwood Day Centre, and Year 3 from Annesley Primary School. They visit the site twice and also have a later session back at school looking at the finds.
This is Johnny! So where does this go?
Sit down, move backwards so you can all see. Can you explain to us why you think that one comes first?
We'll do one tray at a time and then you will be allowed to touch it. You wash that one?
That one and that one.
Oh, lovely. Now then, when do we think this one went on the timeline? Who's going to go? Would you like to have a go? Would you like to go and take it and stand where you think on the timeline that one would go? Between those two, there, that's right. It belongs between the Middle Ages and the Tudors. Thank you. Put that piece back. Well done.
Meanwhile, back in Trench 3, Andy's team is uncovering a complex area.
Since you last saw us, we've unearthed more of this pathway and this wall of the building. But what we found after that, it's quite exciting, is we found the ground surface inside the building was higher and it was raised artificially. It had been built a wall and then it was coming this way, and underneath it we've got a barrel vaulted ceiling of a cellar, and the cellar's running that way. And we know from Mrs. Kirk that this was the wine cellar, that's what it's known as. Apparently she lost a load of chickens down here as well at some point, so we're going to go and have a look. Well, we're not going to look for the chickens.
Out in the woods, Jeff, who lived at Kirkby Hardwick in the 40s and 50s, and Pam are revealing a stretch of wall.
I left when I was 14, which is 53 years ago, but it's always remained in my heart.
It's too big to be just a garden wall. Could it be a remnant of the medieval house? If it is, maybe the house was much bigger than we thought. More excavation here could give us the answer. Trench 5 is really a modern cut drainage ditch slicing through the side of the last house, exposing walls and old window frames.
So we assume that's the outside, and it could be a window frame. That could be the slot for the glass. That's about twice as thick as normal window glass. Remember we said there was a groove in that, so we assume that's a window frame.
Excavation is just one of the skills required on site. Equally important is recording what you found by photography, measurement and drawing.
This is where I need a step ladder.
The other person trying to make sure it's as perfect as possible, yes. You can do the same.
Right,
So, well, the first thing is to mark this edge in. It's starting to look like that. How are you getting on?
Oh, is that his big square?
where's the plumb bob? And then we'll get it done really fast and you'll know all about drawing. So what we do with the plumb bob?
I got the concept with that.
Yep, so that's on the edge. It's on the edge of this frame.
Yeah.
So it's a metre this way.
Yes.
Which is up here. So on this line.
Yes, so, and it's how many that way?
Well,
it's the last
20,
one.
40, 60,
so it's
80.
got to be this.
Yeah, so it's in this top big square.
It's in there.
Yeah, and it's 6 centimetres from that line this way.
Right.
Which is the next
Which
square
is
down.
That square.
No, it's that one.
What is that square?
That square, that big square, yeah. Which is 1.5 squares.
Trench 3 becomes more and more interesting and illustrates how archaeologists make use of layers or strata in the ground.
When they were demolishing the site, a bucket from a digger has gone in here and here and smashed through something else. It's all been filled in with rubble. And we will look before we leave, but underneath we've got another barrow vaulted cellar. What we're doing here is we create a section. This is a little bit of an introduction to archaeology. Yeah, you can see nicely different layers in our section. This is the top demolition layer. It's full of tiles, roots, bits of mortar, and then it changes into another layer, which is our next context, which is a very thick, compacted coal dust layer. It's almost solid carbon. And that was dumped from off the colliery spoil tip. And then underneath that, at this point, it's very narrow, but at the top, it was 3 or 4 feet thick. And this is our demolition rubble. The whole site was, these are all the stone and the mortar from across the site. It's through here, and then you can see we've come down onto a brown layer, which is an intact courtyard surface. And that's what we do, we dig down through things and we create a section so you can see the patterns of the archaeology in that section.
Now it's Friday, the 14th of October. 2 weeks of excavation here have come to an end. Recording continues while we have a visit from VIPs. District and County Councillors and Ashfield MP Gloria De Piro.
Because also the Kirkby one is falling down, and that's the same.
I'll look at you first, and so we'll look at you first, and we'll look at you, and then look at.
It's time to reflect on this exploratory dig. What immediate conclusions does David draw?
Well, it was a very successful excavation. We found a lot of archaeology, and it was in a lot better condition than it might have been given how they demolished the site. We found a lot of evidence for the different dates of activity on the site, and we were able to push it back into the late medieval or early post-medieval period from the archaeological evidence. Still a lot of unanswered questions. We weren't able to disprove the idea that rather than being just a big Tudor house, it might actually have been a massive palace-sized Tudor house, and there's a whole load of other things that would also repay future study.
Finally, we want to share our efforts and discoveries with local people, and about 70 people are drawn to site by a short article in the local paper. Many of them have their own memories of Kirkby Hardwick. Some even bring valuable new source material for our historical research of the Great Tudor House.
Jeff lived in parts that was not the better bit of the house, and Betty lived in the other bit that was the better bit.
It seems to have been something to do with that's a part of it.
And what do our visitors think of it all?
It's a very exciting site. There's obviously a very high potential here for further discoveries, and if funding could be obtained to carry out further excavations, I think it would be a great idea.
I know there's only sort of small trenches here, there and everywhere, but it must be quite a big site and quite an important one. So I'm delighted it's actually coming under the spotlight.
I think it's absolutely fantastic that we've lost so much heritage, that to try and just, well, not recapture what was here, but to give us an idea what was here that has been lost.
My father, when he was a boy, used to live at the summit on Mary Street, and he used to come to the house to deliver pop.
And it was a lovely place, it was magic. You know, you play in the trees and everything.
Because I've always been fascinated with the area, because I was born in Kirkby Ashfield, and it's a shame that these places go and people don't remember them.
The biggest memory of mine is the stained glass rose window. It was beautiful, and I've always wondered where that had gone.
It would be nice, you know, when it's all uncovered, it would look lovely then to actually be able to walk around and imagine each room as it would have been. So I'm quite looking forward to see if they get the funding up and come back.
No, I think it's very fascinating for children like this to be able to look at it, so very good.
Yeah, it's actually very interesting.
Well, I'm a member of the Sherwood Archaeological Society, who's given a fair amount of help over this last couple of weeks. Unfortunately, not been able to come myself until today, but it really does look an exciting project from the practical side of things, and the number of people getting involved in the research side of things is also very good, and it is a nice long-term project, providing funding can be made for it.
Hopefully this video has given you a window into the first phase of work at Kirkby Hardwick. This project, and many others like it, go to show just how much history there is to find beneath our feet.